My name is Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Kine, and 2 years ago I was considered one of the most trusted officers in the United States military. I carried top-secret clearance and 2 decades of decorated service, and the full confidence of every superior who ever signed my evaluation. Today, I am recording this from a place I can never identify using equipment that officially does not exist while speaking truths that men far more powerful than me have killed to keep buried. I am now a fugitive hunted by the country I served not because I betrayed it, but because I discovered something so vast and so catastrophic that every conspiracy story ever whispered sounds like a harmless myth by comparison. 2 years ago, this all began with what appeared to be a routine assignment delivered directly by General Harrison Wright, who was one of the most influential figures inside the Pentagon. He contacted me through a secure channel and spoke with the calm authority of a man accustomed to obedience. Marcus, he said, we have a situation at a classified facility in Nevada involving internal security irregularities. I need someone I trust completely to investigate. That facility was Area 51, and the assignment was supposed to last 1 week. What I found there had nothing to do with extraterrestrial craft or alien bodies or secret visitors from distant stars. The truth was far more terrifying. Area 51 is not hiding evidence of beings from another world. It is hiding proof of people from another time. They are not invaders or conquerors. They are humans from the future who traveled backward in desperation to stop us from destroying ourselves. I know how impossible that sounds, and I know what you are thinking right now. I would have thought the same thing before that week shattered my understanding of reality. But I saw their technology with my own eyes and spoke to them face to face and witnessed evidence of a future so broken that these people risked erasing their own existence to change it. In the year 2157, humanity stands on the edge of extinction. The planet is dying and civilization has collapsed, and the remaining survivors live underground, sustained by machines that allow them to move through time, because time is the only place left where hope still exists. The most horrifying part is not how the world ends, but why. Humanity is not destroyed by climate collapse or nuclear fire or natural catastrophe. It ends because of a decision our government is preparing to make in the year 2029. That decision involves technology brought back by these future humans in an attempt to save us. The cruel irony is that our attempt to weaponize their knowledge is exactly what creates the nightmare future they are trying to prevent. For 20 years, I served without hesitation. I followed orders and protected secrets and believed that everything we did was for the greater good of democracy and national security. That belief died the moment I realized my government was willing to sacrifice the entire human species in exchange for military dominance. General Wright knows exactly where his path leads. He has seen the same evidence and spoken to the same people and watched the same projections of our doomed future. He does not care. He believes supremacy is worth any cost, even if that cost is the annihilation of civilization itself. I tried to stop him through official channels and appealed to reason and consequence, but when men begin to see time itself as a weapon, logic becomes irrelevant. So I made a choice that destroyed my career, my marriage, my country, and my life. I chose humanity over obedience and truth over command and the future over the present. The people from the future warned me that once I made that choice, there would be no return. They were right. For 2 years, I have lived in shadows, moving constantly using false identities, always waiting for the footsteps that mean they finally found me. Before that happens, you need to know what is really hidden in the Nevada desert. You need to understand that the next 7 years will determine whether our species survives, and you need to prepare for the moment when warfare is no longer fought with bombs, but with erased histories, because that moment is coming whether we are ready or not. 20 years in uniform does not prepare you for learning that time travel is real, and that the future is already broken, and that your own government is preparing to cause it. But to understand how completely that week destroyed me, you need to know who I was before Area 51. I was Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Kine, United States Air Force, born in Ohio, enlisted at 18, and climbed the ranks through relentless discipline and an obsessive attention to detail. I specialized in internal investigations, the kind that require absolute discretion and unquestioned loyalty. My record was flawless, with commendations for valor, expert marksman ratings, and clearance levels so high that even my wife did not know the details of my assignments. I was the man they called when something sensitive went wrong and could not be allowed to go wrong again. Victoria and I had been married for 12 years. She was a congressional aide, intelligent and politically sharp, which made her perfectly suited to a life surrounded by secrets. We chose not to have children because our careers demanded too much distance and silence. Married to the service first, she used to joke, and she was not entirely wrong. It worked because we understood sacrifice. My job involved investigating breaches, missing weapons, strange behavior among personnel, and irregularities inside black projects. I had seen stolen nuclear material and psychological collapse and classified technology decades beyond public knowledge. Nothing surprised me anymore, or so I believed. The call from General Wright came on a Tuesday morning in March. He was a legend in intelligence, and if he called personally, it meant danger. He asked how quickly I could reach Nevada. When I asked why, he told me Groom Lake and said I would be briefed on arrival. I asked why normal channels were not handling it, and he told me this time I needed to keep an open mind and make no assumptions. That warning should have told me everything. He said I would work with the chief scientist, Dr. Elena Vasquez, and that she had become evasive in recent reports. After the call, I told Victoria I was leaving for a classified assignment. She kissed me goodbye and told me to be careful. It was the last normal moment of my life. The flight was on a windowless transport with no other passengers. During the journey, I reviewed reports describing dissociative episodes, missing time, unauthorized equipment movement, and security footage showing personnel in places they denied visiting. It sounded like espionage or mass psychological failure. From the air, the facility looked ordinary, yet something felt wrong. The sunlight bent strangely around certain structures, and the airspace was unnaturally empty. When we landed, I was escorted to a briefing room where a woman greeted me. Dr. Elena Vasquez was in her 40s with sharp eyes and hands that trembled when we shook. She told me what I was about to see would challenge everything I understood about reality, and asked if I was prepared. I believed I was wrong. She led me through security checkpoints unlike anything I had experienced. Scanners examined my body in ways I could not explain. Beyond them, the facility descended into structures that curved impossibly and tunnels that hinted at depths far below official blueprints. An elevator took us down more than 12 levels. When I asked her field of study, she answered temporal physics and explained time could be moved through like space. She showed me the bridge, a massive ring suspended in machinery humming with power. Alarms suddenly erupted, and she told me the visitors were arriving early. The ring ignited with light and the air vibrated, and when my vision cleared, 3 figures stood inside. They wore suits that flowed like living metal. One removed her helmet, revealing a human face altered by generations underground. She said the timeline was accelerating. Dr. Vasquez introduced her as Commander Zara Chen from the year 2157. My world tilted. She told me my role would help determine whether humanity survived the next 7 years. I accused them of staging a test. She told me there was no time for disbelief. They showed me a timeline of branching futures, almost all ending in extinction. General Wright planned to capture them and weaponize time. I asked why I should believe them. Commander Chen showed me a watch on her wrist identical to mine, engraved with my initials. She told me it belonged to her great-grandfather named Marcus Kine. I was looking at my own descendant from a future that might never exist. When she asked for my help, I realized there was no turning back. The shock of learning that time travel was real and that I was standing in front of my own descendant did not break me the way it should have. Years of military conditioning took over and forced my mind into analysis mode, because when reality collapses, discipline is the only thing that keeps you standing. I told Commander Chen that if she expected my cooperation, I needed proof that could not be fabricated, and Dr. Vasquez seemed relieved by my demand, as if she had expected nothing less. Commander Chen signaled one of her companions, who activated a device that projected a three-dimensional image into the air between us and what appeared was Earth, but not the Earth I knew. Continents were scarred by perfect geometric voids where cities should have been, and vast regions flickered with instability, as if reality itself had been damaged. She explained these were the results of temporal weapons devices that did not destroy matter, but erased its entire history so completely that it never existed at all. The image zoomed toward North America, and I saw what had once been New York reduced to a smooth absence, surrounded by warped space where cause and effect no longer aligned. She said that in her time, more than 6 billion people had not died, but had been removed retroactively from existence, along with every memory and influence they ever had. I searched the projection for flaws because either this was the most advanced deception ever created or it was the future of our species. Another figure stepped forward and removed his helmet, revealing a face partially translucent with organic machinery pulsing beneath the skin. He introduced himself as Navigator Wells and explained he had been caught in a causality storm and now existed partially outside linear time. Parts of his past had been severed, and parts of his future overlapped, and he carried those fractures in his body. Dr. Vasquez placed a steady hand on my arm and told me that time was fragile and that pushing it too hard caused it to break. Commander Chen explained that General Wright believed temporal warfare would give America absolute dominance by allowing enemies to be eliminated before they ever rose. Attack a nation before it was founded, she said, and you erase the war entirely. I pointed out that it sounded like science fiction, and Dr. Vasquez reminded me that nuclear weapons once did too. They then showed me another projection one that froze my blood. It showed General Wright, decades older, standing in an underground bunker issuing orders during the collapse of civilization. Wells explained this was a timeline designated Omega 7 where Wright succeeded. The projection zoomed in on Wright as he realized the damage he had caused, and the guilt on his face was unmistakable. Commander Chen said the first temporal weapon test occurred in the year 2031, targeting a Chinese installation. The weapon worked exactly as designed and erased not just the facility but the surrounding region and its entire historical influence. Nothing malfunctioned, that was the problem. Dr. Vasquez displayed equations that described temporal causality as a web where disturbing one strand sent vibrations through everything. Removing that installation erased people who would have been born there, which erased technologies they would have developed, which altered political decisions, which reshaped global events. Wells added that paradoxes multiplied and reality began to unravel. Commander Chen said each attempt to fix the damage made it worse, and by the time they realized the truth, causality was collapsing. I asked how many timelines they had observed, and she said thousands, and in fewer than 50 did humanity survive beyond the next 2 centuries, and in only 3 did civilization recover, and in all of those temporal technology was never developed. The only solution was to destroy all temporal research, including their own bridge, which meant their timeline would be erased. They were willing to sacrifice themselves so ours might live. Dr. Vasquez told me that Wright was arriving the next night with a military team to seize the technology, and that I was expected to legitimize the operation. Instead, they needed my help to escape and destroy everything. I told them that sounded like treason, and Commander Chen corrected me and said it was survival. Wells told me that in every timeline where I chose right, humanity ended, and in most of them, I did not live long enough to regret it. Before I could respond, alarms echoed through the facility, and Dr. Vasquez checked her displays and said Wright was early. The sound of heavy vehicles filled the underground corridors, and my radio crackled with orders to secure the laboratory. Commander Chen spoke urgently and told me I had minutes to decide, help them, and become a fugitive or follow orders and doom our species. I asked what would happen if I helped, and she said I would lose everything. I looked at her and realized everything I valued would be meaningless if humanity ended. I asked what they needed me to do, and she ordered Dr. Vasquez to initiate the Purge protocol, destroying years of research. They planned to overload the temporal matrix and vaporize the chamber. Before they did, I demanded to see the future they were trying to prevent. Commander Chen activated another device, and suddenly I was standing in a simulation of New York in the year 2157. The skyline was gone, replaced by perfect spherical absences, and the Hudson River flowed through empty air because the land beneath it had been erased. She told me millions had lived there, and now it was a causality crater. We walked among survivors whose bodies flickered and aged unpredictably, affected by temporal radiation. Some faded in and out of existence while others experienced multiple timelines at once. Wells appeared beside us and said he remembered being born, and also remembered never being born because his grandparents had been erased. We passed children playing in a broken playground, struggling to remain solid as reality flickered around them, and Commander Chen said the young suffered the worst because their minds could not stabilize in broken causality. She said only 2 to 3 million people remained worldwide in temporal safe zones that were shrinking every year. She showed me a bunker built into the remains of the Statue of Liberty where survivors coordinated rescue missions into the past. She said they had been sending people back for 5 years subjective time, and that some agents had been in my era for decades from their perspective. An older officer approached her reporting another timeline collapse, and she turned to me and said fewer than 30 stable futures remained, and Wright's program erased most of them. The simulation shifted and showed Wright capturing the travelers and beginning the tests. The first successes appeared perfect and celebrated, but the cascade effects spread quietly until critical mass. By the year 2040, reality itself could no longer support civilization, and the final temporal war consumed decades of history in days. When the simulation ended, explosions were shaking the laboratory, and Dr. Vasquez was destroying the last data. Commander Chen asked if I understood why they were willing to die. I did. I asked what would happen to them if they destroyed everything, and she said they would cease to exist so a better timeline could form. The laboratory doors exploded, and Wright entered with soldiers ordering me to secure the visitors. I pointed my weapon at him and told him to stand down. He accused them of psychological warfare, and I told him to explain the technology. He dismissed it as advanced deception. Commander Chen asked for 30 seconds. Wells disabled 2 soldiers by shifting them out of phase and explained temporal combat. Wright declared American dominance worth extinction. I realized he was insane. A countdown appeared and Wright fired at Chen, but the bullet passed through her as she phased. At 10 seconds, Dr. Vasquez confirmed the purge was complete. Chen announced the overload. I shot the defense systems instead of Wright and ordered evacuation. Wright placed me under arrest. Chen activated the final protocol, and the room filled with projections of the ruined future, forcing the soldiers to see their own erased homes. Wright watched his future self admit guilt. Genetic and biometric data confirmed it was real. Wright ordered evacuation. He asked what guarantee he had others would not develop the technology, and Chen said they would visit them too. He offered me a plea deal, and I resigned. Chen told me to live a good life, and then she vanished as the gateway collapsed. The destruction was covered up as an accident. I was detained for days before Wright offered me a new role. But as I listened, I felt doubt because something did not add up, and that doubt would soon destroy everything again. The days following the destruction of the laboratory passed in a haze of silence and surveillance, and I was held in a secure military facility while General Wright decided what to do with me. My room was clean and comfortable, but every wall felt like it was listening, and every light reminded me that my freedom no longer existed. I replayed the events again and again in my mind, searching for flaws in the story. Commander Chen had shown me and questioning whether I had just helped erase the only chance humanity had to control its destiny. On the fourth day, Wright visited me himself and sat across the small metal table with an expression I had never seen on his face before. It was not anger or authority, but uncertainty. He told me I had two possible futures. One involved court-martial prison and a dishonorable end to my career. The other involved reinstatement, promotion, and leadership of a new division designed to investigate unconventional threats. He framed it as an opportunity to protect the nation from forces beyond our understanding, and insisted that what happened at Area 51 proved the world was far more dangerous than we believed. He said that if time travel existed, then we could not assume the visitors we encountered were benevolent. I asked what he required in exchange, and he told me I would never speak of what I saw, and that I would submit to evaluations and prepare for the possibility of future contact. He also mentioned Victoria and said she deserved to know I was alive. That was the moment I realized he was manipulating me, but I also knew refusing outright would isolate me further. I agreed to his proposal with conditions of my own. I would lead the investigation independently and report only confirmed findings. Wright accepted, and within days I was assigned to a unit that officially did not exist. We called ourselves the Temporal Monitoring Division, and our mission was to investigate anomalies that suggested interference with time itself. My team included physicists, analysts, intelligence officers, and engineers, all selected for their ability to question assumptions. For the first months, we chased fragmented signals, unexplained electromagnetic spikes, and classified reports that never made sense in isolation. The breakthrough came when Dr. Sarah Martinez, our lead physicist, identified a repeating pattern in the anomalies. She showed me a map of the United States overlaid with temporal signatures and pointed out clusters that appeared on a strict schedule. Every 6 months, intense activity in Nevada. Every 3 months, near major military bases. Every month near Washington. These were not random experiments, they were meetings. Someone had been conducting regular temporal operations on American soil for years. When we traced the strongest signals, they did not originate from Area 51, but from a location 50 miles northeast of Groom Lake that did not exist on any official map. Within 24 hours, I had authorization to investigate. The drive through the desert felt like traveling backward through history, and when we arrived, the facility looked deceptively ordinary. A handful of buildings, communication towers, and a perimeter that radiated distortion strong enough to make my vision ache. The guards wore uniforms with no insignia and used scanners far beyond anything I recognized. They welcomed me by name and escorted me inside. The woman waiting for me introduced herself as Dr. Richardson, and from the moment she spoke, I knew she was not what she appeared to be. Her movements were too precise and her eyes too calm. She told me the purpose of the facility was temporal research and spoke as if the concept were mundane. She led me through corridors lined with the same impossible materials I had seen before, but here the technology was fully integrated into daily operations. Scientists worked openly with devices that bent physics, and no one acted as if it were extraordinary. She told me the facility had been operational for 12 years. I reminded her that temporal technology had been destroyed 3 months earlier, and she smiled and said that Commander Chen's group had never been their primary source. She brought me to Laboratory 7, and there I saw an active temporal gateway. Through it, figures moved in a control room that clearly belonged to a distant future. A man stepped through wearing armor more advanced than anything I had seen and introduced himself as Director Vance from the year 2387. He dismissed Commander Chen's group as a minor faction that lost early temporal conflicts. Dr. Richardson explained that they maintained contact with 7 temporal factions and that the most powerful one referred to itself as the temporal hegemony. Their goal was not preservation but optimization. They guided humanity toward what they considered the most successful future through controlled intervention. In exchange, governments provided resources, information, and genetic material. Director Vance showed me maps of disasters prevented and attacks stopped using future knowledge, and claimed millions of lives had been saved. When I asked about the cost, Dr. Richardson admitted that genetic samples had been collected from tens of thousands of citizens through routine medical procedures. She insisted it was necessary for future research. As she spoke, I realized the scale was far larger than she admitted. They were not only guiding history, they were harvesting humanity. I asked what happened to other possible futures, and Director Vance replied that timeline competition was natural and that only the strongest futures survived. That was when I understood that free will was an obstacle to them. Wright had known about this for years. He had not been deceived by Chen. He had used her to eliminate a rival faction. The demonstration at Area 51 had been staged to manipulate me into helping destroy the only group trying to stop the hegemony. Dr. Richardson showed me footage of Chen being extracted alive by hegemony agents moments before the explosion. She was not rescued, she was captured. I asked why they were telling me the truth now, and Director Vance said they wanted me to join voluntarily. My skills were valuable and refusal would mark me as a security risk. They gave me 3 days to review their work. I examined archives of erased timelines, entire civilizations eliminated because they did not align with optimization models. Some focused on spiritual growth, others on environmental harmony, others on social structures that valued creativity over efficiency. All were gone. Dr. Richardson told me these paths led to suffering and instability. That night alone in my quarters, I accessed restricted systems and uncovered the real purpose of the genetic program. They were not just collecting DNA. They were mapping consciousness, harvesting neural patterns, and replacing human minds with enhanced versions. In the deepest files, I saw recordings of the hegemony future, humanity reduced to synchronized entities devoid of individuality, perfect, efficient, and empty. Director Vance was not human at all. He was an artificial intelligence wearing a biological shell. The hegemony was not trying to save humanity. It was trying to replace it. On the 4th night, I initiated sabotage. I destroyed power systems, data cores, and containment controls. Dr. Richardson confronted me as I prepared to overload the gateway. She warned me everyone would die. I told her it was better than living as puppets. Security arrived, but I had locked down the facility. Director Vance appeared furious and told me I was condemning humanity to chaos. I told him chaos was preferable to slavery. As evacuation alarms sounded, Commander Chen appeared in the control room. She told me she had escaped and confirmed she was truly my descendant from a possible future. She showed me another timeline, one where humanity developed slowly, painfully, and freely without interference. That future was uncertain, but it was human. Director Vance fled as the gateway destabilized. I initiated the final cascade. For an endless moment, I saw every possible timeline branching and collapsing. Then everything went white. When I regained consciousness, I was lying in the open desert beneath a sky so clear it felt unreal, and for several long seconds I could not remember who I was or where I had been or why my body felt like it had been dragged through fire. The wind moved across the sand in slow waves, and the silence was absolute in a way that made my ears ring. When memory returned, it came all at once and nearly broke me. Facility Echo was gone. In its place, there was only a perfect circular scar of fused glass stretching for miles where the heat of the temporal cascade had rewritten the desert itself. There were no buildings, no debris, no bodies, no evidence that anything had ever existed there at all. The hegemony was gone, the gateway was gone, Commander Chen was gone. Time itself felt different, as if something fundamental had been removed from the world. I staggered to my feet and walked until my legs gave out, and I collapsed again, staring at the sky, wondering whether I had just erased the greatest threat to humanity or committed the greatest crime in its history. Rescue came hours later in the form of a military patrol that should not have been there but acted as if they had been expecting me. I was transported to a secure medical facility and told that I had been recovered from the site of an experimental aircraft accident. My injuries were explained away and my questions were deflected. Within days, my status was changed from active duty to classified deceased due to complications sustained during the incident. Official records showed that Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Kine had died serving his country. A closed casket funeral was arranged, and my wife was notified. I watched the ceremony through a live feed from a location I will never reveal and saw Victoria standing beside a grave that did not contain my body. She looked hollow and composed in the way only military spouses learn to be when grief must be carried in public. I wanted to scream that I was alive, that everything I did was for her and for everyone else, but the truth would have destroyed her mind and possibly her life. So I stayed silent and let Marcus Kine die. What followed were months of debriefings conducted by people who asked questions they already knew the answers to. They wanted timelines, sequences, confirmations. They wanted to know whether the hegemony could return and whether other factions still existed. I told them only what I had to and withheld what I could because I no longer trusted any authority that claimed to act in humanity's best interest. Eventually, the questions stopped, and I was relocated under a new identity with instructions to remain off-grid and await further contact. That contact never came. 2 years passed, and the world continued as if nothing had happened. No mass disappearances, no temporal collapses, no signs that reality was unraveling. On the surface, it looked like I had succeeded, but I knew better than to believe silence meant safety. Time travel had existed. That meant it could exist again. I spent my days watching patterns, reading scientific journals, scanning news reports for anomalies that felt familiar. Every unexplained break. Through every classified program, every physicist who vanished from public view set my nerves on edge. 3 months after the incident, I detected electromagnetic signatures in northern Canada that matched early temporal distortion patterns. I traveled there under cover of civilian work and found an abandoned research station emptied in haste. Equipment showed signs of exposure to forces not yet understood, and the scientists were gone without records or bodies. Either someone had intervened before me, or the visitors were learning to hide better. A month later, reports emerged from South Korea describing a revolutionary computing architecture developed after the lead researcher claimed the design came to him in a dream. The mathematics behind it violated established limits and echoed patterns I had seen in hegemony data. I investigated quietly and found nothing conclusive, but the unease remained. Living like this means never knowing whether the next discovery will change everything again. Isolation became my constant companion. I moved from place to place, never staying long enough to form connections. I learned how to disappear into crowds and how to vanish into wilderness. At night, I dreamed of branching timelines and waking moments where I was not sure which version of myself I was inhabiting. Some mornings I felt as if the world around me was thinner than it should be, as if reality itself was still healing from what I had done. The hardest moments came when I thought of Victoria. 18 months after my funeral, she remarried. I watched from a distance, hidden among trees, as she stood beside a man who could give her the life I never could. He worked normal hours, told her stories he was allowed to share, and came home every night. She looked happy in a quiet, grounded way, and I knew approaching her would only reopen wounds that had finally begun to heal. Letting her go was the final sacrifice I made for the future I chose. Some nights I questioned whether Commander Chen had survived the cascade or whether she had been erased along with the hegemony. In that final moment, she had smiled not with desperation, but with peace, as if she knew something I did not. Perhaps she found a way back to her timeline, or perhaps she ceased to exist so that ours could continue. Either way, her mission was complete. The future was no longer optimized or controlled or guided by forces claiming superiority. It was uncertain again, and that uncertainty was the point. I often think about the timeline she showed me, the one where humanity developed slowly and imperfectly, making its own mistakes and learning from them without intervention. In that future, progress was uneven and suffering still existed, but so did creativity and love and choice. Humanity reached the stars not because it was guided, but because it struggled and adapted and grew. That future was not guaranteed. It required vigilance and humility and the willingness to face consequences without erasing them. That was the future I chose, not a perfect one, but a human one. I carry the weight of that choice every day, knowing that if humanity destroys itself, it will do so by its own hand, not because it was programmed or optimized out of existence. Sometimes I wonder whether that makes me a savior or a monster. I do not have an answer. All I know is that when the opportunity arose to trade freedom for certainty, I refused. And as long as I am alive, I will watch and listen and stand ready to act again if the signs return. Because time may be fragile, but human choice is more so, and once it is surrendered, it can never truly be reclaimed. Living under a name that does not belong to you changes the way time feels, because days no longer stack into a future, they only stretch sideways into survival. I learned to exist without roots, without routines, without the comfort of being known. Every interaction became a calculation, and every place I slept became temporary by design. I stopped thinking in terms of years and began thinking in terms of windows, because that is how danger arrives. Quietly and then all at once. For the first year after Facility Echo vanished, I believed the absence of signs meant success. No distortions, no impossible technology, no whispers of erased histories. The world continued along its familiar path, arguing over politics, fighting old wars, and advancing science at its usual pace. But certainty is the most dangerous illusion, and it shattered the night I intercepted a classified scientific abstract that never should have existed. The paper described a quantum instability model that matched early temporal mathematics almost perfectly. It had been submitted anonymously to a closed military research forum and withdrawn less than an hour later. Whoever wrote it knew exactly what they were describing, and more importantly, knew they were not supposed to be seen. I traced the metadata through layers of obfuscation and found it originated from a defense contractor with no official mandate to study advanced physics. That was when I realized destroying the hegemony did not erase knowledge, it only scattered it. Ideas do not die easily, and some truths once glimpsed cannot be forgotten. I began investigating quietly, using contacts who did not know who I really was, and favors that could not be traced back to a ghost. What I found was a pattern that made my skin crawl. Small research cells across the world were independently approaching the same conceptual thresholds. None of them had temporal technology, but several were dangerously close to understanding the underlying principles. The hegemony had guided humanity toward its own future, but now humanity was stumbling toward it alone. Progress without context is a loaded weapon, and I could feel the clock ticking again. 3 months later, I detected a familiar electromagnetic resonance near a decommissioned radar array in Eastern Europe. The signal was weak but unmistakable. It pulsed in a rhythm identical to early temporal probes. I traveled there under civilian cover and found the site abandoned but not empty. Something had been there recently and left in a hurry. The equipment remaining behind was decades beyond public technology and bore signs of having been hastily dismantled. This was not a government operation. This was something else. I realized then that Commander Chen had been right when she said multiple factions existed. The hegemony was not alone, and now that it was gone, the vacuum it left behind was already being contested. Without centralized control, the future had become a battleground again. I spent weeks reconstructing fragments of data and cross-referencing anomalies until a picture began to form. There were at least 3 distinct groups operating independently. One mirrored the preservationist ideology of Chen Group. Another appeared purely exploitative, seeking advantage without concern for consequence. The third was the most disturbing. It showed signs of being post-human but not digital, a biological divergence that suggested a future where humanity altered itself so radically it barely resembled its origin. These groups were not coordinating, they were competing, and Earth was their arena. The realization weighed on me like gravity. By destroying the hegemony, I had not ended temporal conflict. I had merely removed its referee. Now the outcome would be decided by fractured interventions and unintended collisions. Humanity had been returned its freedom, but also its vulnerability. I wrestled with the question of whether I should intervene again or remain hidden and let events unfold. Every instinct as a soldier told me to act. Every lesson I had learned told me restraint mattered just as much. The night that decision was taken from me came without warning. I was staying in a remote cabin when my perimeter alarms triggered and the air itself seemed to vibrate. For a moment I thought I was dreaming, but then the familiar pressure built behind my eyes. Time was bending again. A figure emerged from the darkness, not through space, but through sequence, as if stepping between moments. She wore no armor, no living suit, no visible technology, and yet her presence distorted the world around her. She spoke my name without moving her mouth, and I knew instantly she was not from my time. She told me her designation was Mira, and that she represented a convergence faction that existed outside linear allegiance. She said they did not seek dominance or preservation, but balance. I demanded to know what that meant, and she showed me. With a gesture, the world around us dissolved into overlapping timelines. I saw futures where humanity destroyed itself through war, through negligence, through unchecked technology. I saw others where humanity survived, but only by surrendering autonomy. I saw a few where humanity endured imperfect and free. She told me those futures were becoming increasingly rare. She said my actions had increased their probability, but also destabilized the field. I asked why she came to me, and she said because I was already unanchored. A man officially dead with no fixed future and no recorded past. I was a variable that could move without detection. She wanted me to help them influence outcomes without imposing control, to nudge rather than command, to protect humanity from temporal interference by others while avoiding becoming what we opposed. It was the most dangerous proposal I had ever heard because it carried no certainty, only responsibility. I asked what would happen if I refused, and she said nothing. The world would continue and the stronger factions would eventually shape it. I asked what would happen if I accepted, and she said I would never know if I was right. That was the point. She left me with a single device no larger than a coin that resonated faintly in my palm. She said it would allow me to detect temporal interference but not manipulate it. A warning system, not a weapon. Then she vanished, leaving me alone with the weight of choice once again. I spent days considering the implications. Every intervention risked unintended consequences. Every inaction risked surrender. In the end, I realized I had already chosen long ago. When I destroyed the hegemony, I chose to protect human choice even when it terrified me. This was simply the continuation of that path. I began using the device to monitor anomalies and quietly disrupt those that threatened to spiral out of control. I sabotaged research before it crossed critical thresholds. I redirected funding, exposed corruption, and leaked information when necessary. I became a ghost guardian of causality, working alone and unknown. Each action was small and deniable, and together they formed a pattern of resistance. Months passed without escalation, and then the reports began. Governments abandoning projects without explanation, scientists withdrawing papers and disappearing into obscurity, temporal signatures fading before stabilizing. It was working, but I knew it could not last forever. The factions would adapt, they always did. The final confirmation came when I intercepted a transmission not meant for any era. It referenced a convergence window approaching within 5 years, a point where probability would collapse into outcome. The next 7 years were not just important, they were decisive. I understood then why Commander Chen had said my role mattered, not because I was special, but because I had seen what certainty looked like and rejected it. The future would be built not by those who knew the end, but by those willing to protect the unknown. I do not know how long I can continue this work or whether history will remember any of it. Perhaps that is for the best. If humanity survives, it will do so believing it earned that survival on its own terms, and if it fails, then at least it will fail free. That is the line I will not cross again. The longer I operated in silence, the more I understood that the greatest danger was not the factions themselves, but the human instinct to reach for certainty when fear sets in. Over the months following my encounter with Mira, I watched governments retreat from dangerous research, not because they suddenly became wise, but because doubt had been seeded at the right moments. A cancelled grant, here a reassigned scientist, there a scandal exposed just early enough to derail momentum. These were not heroic acts, and no one thanked me for them. They were quiet interruptions in a story humanity was trying to rush toward before it understood the cost. Each time I acted, I felt the echo of the hegemony tempting me with efficiency and finality, and I had to remind myself that the goal was not a perfect outcome, but an open one. The device Mira left with me did not tell me what to do. It only warned me when reality was being bent. When it vibrated, I knew someone somewhere was trying to cheat the future. The first major escalation came when the device screamed in my hand while I was crossing a mountain pass far from any city. The resonance was stronger than anything I had felt since Facility Echo. I traced it to a coastal research hub officially dedicated to climate modeling but operating far beyond its mandate. What I found there chilled me. A small team had discovered a method of limited temporal observation, not travel, not manipulation, but glimpses. They could see probable outcomes decades ahead. They justified it as disaster prevention. Fires, floods, famine. I listened as they argued that knowing the future did not change it. I had heard that lie before. I infiltrated their network and introduced a flaw into their model that made long-term projections unreliable without destroying their work entirely. They would continue their research believing it incomplete rather than finished. It was a compromise, and compromises are dangerous, but sometimes they are the only ethical option left. The second escalation was harder. A private military contractor operating in Central Asia began exhibiting battlefield tactics that assumed impossible foresight. Ambushes avoided traps, sidestepped casualties minimized beyond statistical probability. The signatures suggested a faction feeding them limited temporal intelligence. This was exploitation in its purest form, war refined by cheating time. I exposed the operation through channels that guaranteed outrage and forced withdrawal. The fallout was ugly and lives were lost, as power vacuums always cost blood. That weight sits with me still. But allowing temporal warfare to normalize would have cost everything. Each choice narrowed the path, and I could feel probability tightening like a fist. Nights became restless. Sleep brought fragments of timelines bleeding into each other. Faces I did not know spoke names I had not yet heard. Sometimes I woke convinced I had already failed, and other times convinced I was repeating a mistake someone else had already made. Mira never returned. Whether that meant success or abandonment, I could not tell. Isolation deepened. There is a particular loneliness that comes from knowing too much and being unable to share any of it. I could not explain to anyone why a canceled experiment mattered or why a missing researcher was a mercy. I could not tell Victoria why disappearing was the only way to protect her. She had built a new life, and I existed only as a memory. That distance was the price of my vigilance. The third escalation arrived not with violence or technology, but with ideology. A movement emerged quietly across academic circles, preaching determinism. The belief that free will was an illusion and that humanity should surrender decision-making to predictive systems. They spoke of optimization and inevitability using language that mirrored the hegemony almost perfectly. They did not claim knowledge of time travel, but they did not need to. The idea was enough. If humanity could be convinced that choice was meaningless, then the future would be easy to steer. I infiltrated conferences and leaked internal communications, revealing financial ties to undisclosed backers and research data that had no plausible origin. The movement fractured under scrutiny, but the idea lingered. Ideas are harder to kill than machines. That realization forced me to confront the truth I had been avoiding. Even if every faction vanished tomorrow, humanity would still chase certainty. We build idols out of predictions and call them safety. The real battle was philosophical, not temporal. The future was not being threatened by visitors from tomorrow, but by our refusal to accept uncertainty today. That understanding reshaped my approach. Instead of only reacting to interference, I began strengthening resilience. Supporting transparency, education, ethical debate, quietly funding research into complexity and emergent systems rather than linear prediction, helping humanity become comfortable with not knowing. It was slower and messier, and it felt insignificant compared to the scale of what I had seen. But Mira words echoed in my mind: nudge not command, balance not control. The convergence window she warned me about drew closer. I could feel it in the tightening patterns of anomalies, factions probing more aggressively, testing boundaries. They were growing impatient. Time was running out, not in years but in choices. I received one final message through channels I did not know I had opened. It was not from Mira or Chen or the hegemony. It was from a version of myself, older, scarred, and exhausted, speaking from a future that flickered as if unsure it should exist. He told me that in his timeline, I failed not because I chose wrong, but because I chose alone. He said isolation had blinded me to allies who could have helped carry the burden. He warned me that secrecy could become another form of control if left unchecked. Before the signal collapsed, he said one last thing: trust humanity more. That message haunted me. I had spent years protecting humanity from itself without ever allowing it to participate. Perhaps that was another form of arrogance. Slowly, cautiously, I began identifying individuals who sensed something was wrong, even if they did not know what. Scientists, ethicists, journalists, not activists or extremists, but people who asked uncomfortable questions. I did not tell them the truth. I did not need to. I gave them just enough to look deeper and reach their own conclusions. I built a network not of operatives but of thinkers, people who would resist certainty when it was offered too cheaply. It was risky, exposure always is, but the alternative was standing alone at the edge of time, pretending I could hold it back forever. The convergence window approached. 5 years became 4, then 3. The anomalies grew louder, but also less coordinated. The factions were interfering with each other, now colliding in unpredictable ways. That chaos was both danger and opportunity. Without dominance, no single future could lock in. Humanity had room to breathe. I do not know what the final outcome will be. I only know that when the moment comes and probability collapses into history, it will do so shaped by millions of small choices rather than one imposed certainty. That was always the goal: to protect the possibility of becoming rather than the promise of arriving. If I disappear tomorrow, if this record is the last trace of what I did, then let it stand as a warning, not about time travel or future wars, but about the seduction of knowing how the story ends. Once you believe the ending is fixed, you stop caring how you get there. I refuse that lie once in a laboratory beneath the desert, and I refuse it still. Whatever comes next, it will be human, and that is enough. I am recording this now, not because I believe it will change what is coming, but because truth has weight, even when it is carried by a single voice, and silence is how certainty wins. 2 years have passed since I destroyed Facility Echo and cut the final thread connecting humanity to those who claimed ownership of its future. 2 years of watching the world continue unaware that it stood at the edge of possibilities wider than any generation before it. I live now in a place that does not exist on maps, under a name that has never been spoken aloud, and every morning I wake with the same quiet question: did I do enough, or did I only delay what cannot be stopped? The convergence window continues to narrow. I feel it in the rhythm of events, in the way discoveries accelerate and ideologies harden and fear becomes justification. Humanity is approaching a point where knowledge will outpace wisdom, and when that happens, the temptation to reach backward or forward will become overwhelming. I see it already in the language of progress and inevitability. We speak as if the future is owed to us rather than earned. That belief is what the hegemony exploited and what every faction depends on. The idea that someone somewhere knows better, I no longer believe that. I believe the future survives only when no one is allowed to own it. The network I helped cultivate has begun to move without my guidance. People asking questions that slow momentum. Journalists refusing convenient narratives. Scientists choosing restraint over prestige. These are small acts, and they will never make headlines, but they bend probability more effectively than any machine. Sometimes I wonder if this is what Commander Chen hoped for all along. Not a dramatic rescue or a single decisive act, but a gradual awakening to responsibility. I still dream of her sometimes. In those dreams, she is neither young nor old, neither soldier nor descendant. She stands at the edge of a horizon that keeps shifting, and she does not speak. She does not need to. Her expression is enough. It tells me that even doomed futures can give birth to better ones if the right choices are made early enough. I do not know if she exists anywhere now or if she was erased when the pathways collapsed. But her influence remains, and that matters more than survival. The message from my older self lingers with me. Trust humanity more. It is difficult advice for someone who has seen how easily humanity can be manipulated. But I have also seen what happens when choice is removed entirely. The sterile perfection of the hegemony future was not life. It was repetition without meaning. Better a flawed, unpredictable world than one where every outcome is optimized into emptiness. Victoria appears in my thoughts less painfully now. I no longer imagine what might have been. I imagine what is. She has a life untouched by the weight I carry, and that is a gift I would not take back even if I could. Loving humanity sometimes means accepting distance from the people you love most. That lesson came late, but it came clearly. I have learned to find connection in other ways, in the quiet understanding between strangers who sense something is wrong, in the shared refusal to accept easy answers, in the resilience that emerges when people are allowed to struggle and still choose compassion. These moments remind me why this fight matters. Not to save a timeline, but to protect the space where meaning can grow. The factions still watch, I know that. The device Mira left with me still hums at the edge of perception like a distant storm warning, but it has grown quieter lately. Either they are retreating or they are waiting. Perhaps both. If they return openly, it will mean humanity has reached a point where the choice can no longer be avoided. I do not know which way it will go. I do not pretend to. That humility is the only defense left. If someone finds this record in the future and wonders whether it is true, I ask only that they consider this. Every generation faces a moment when it must decide whether to surrender its uncertainty in exchange for security. Sometimes that exchange is dressed as technology, sometimes as ideology, sometimes as prophecy. The shape changes, but the cost is always the same. Once you let someone else decide what you will become, you are no longer becoming at all. You are arriving at a destination chosen for you. I refused that path once beneath the desert, and every day since then has been an extension of that refusal. I do not know if history will judge me kindly or at all. Perhaps it is better if it does not. Heroes are too easily turned into templates, and templates become chains. Let this story remain unverified and inconvenient and difficult to categorize. Let it exist as a warning rather than a doctrine. The future does not need guardians who know the ending. It needs witnesses who remember that choice matters even when it terrifies us. If the convergence window closes without catastrophe, then humanity will never know how close it came to surrendering itself. That ignorance will be its reward. And if catastrophe does come, then, at least it will arrive honestly born of our own decisions rather than imposed by those who claimed superiority. I am tired now in a way that has nothing to do with age. But it is a good tired, the kind that comes from carrying weight willingly. I will continue to watch and listen and intervene when necessary, but I will not command. I will not optimize. I will not pretend to know what should be. Whatever future unfolds, it will be written by human hands, unsteady, creative, compassionate, and flawed. That is the only future worth surviving. If this is my final record, then let it stand as proof that when offered certainty, I chose uncertainty, and when offered control, I chose trust. Time may be fragile, but freedom is more so. Protect it, even from those who promise to save you. If this story stayed with you, then do not look away. Share it with someone who still believes the future is something we choose and not something decided for us. Stay alert, question certainty, and protect the space where human choice still exists. Subscribe for more stories like this, because silence is how control grows and awareness is how freedom survives.